The military dining hall buzzed with chatter and clinking cutlery as sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden patches across the floor. A young woman in her early 20s, dressed neatly in fatigues, sat alone at a corner table. Her posture was straight, her dark hair tied tightly in a bun, and her eyes calm but observant. She looked like any other new recruit except for the quiet confidence that surrounded her. Few noticed her at first, but that was about to change. Private Mason, known for his arrogance and loud mouth, swaggered across the room with two of his friends. He noticed the quiet woman eating alone and smirked. "Hey, rookie, you forgot your manners," he sneered, tossing his empty cup onto her tray. Laughter erupted from his friends as if it were part of a rehearsed act. The woman looked at the cup, then at him. Not angry, not scared, just coldly silent. That silence unsettled him more than any insult could. The laughter grew louder, and Mason took a step closer. "What's the matter? Too shy to talk to a real soldier?" he mocked. The woman finally spoke, her tone calm but firm. "You should pick up what you dropped." Her words sliced through the noise like a blade. Mason's smirk faded for a moment, then he laughed louder to mask his discomfort. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he underestimated. As the cafeteria quieted, a few soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. Something about the way the woman held her ground didn't feel normal. One of Mason's friends nudged him to back off, but his pride wouldn't allow it. He slammed his hand on the table and leaned in closer. "You better learn some respect," he said, his voice low but threatening. The woman didn't flinch. "Respect is earned," she replied, meeting his eyes steadily. Mason's face twisted with frustration. Then, in a moment of reckless anger, he shoved the tray off the table, food and metal clattering onto the floor. Gasps filled the hall. The woman stood up slowly, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp as steel. Every soldier in the room froze, realizing Mason had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Before anyone could react, the sound of boots echoed from the far side of the cafeteria. The room fell silent as Colonel Reeves entered, tall, commanding, his uniform spotless. His eyes moved across the scene and stopped on Emily, the young woman. For a moment, a flicker of recognition crossed his face, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned to Mason. "What's going on here, Private?" he demanded. Mason straightened instantly, his earlier arrogance evaporating. "Sir, just a misunderstanding," he stammered. The colonel's eyes narrowed. "Is that so?" he said slowly. Then turning to the woman, his voice softened just slightly. "Are you all right, Lieutenant?" The room froze. "Lieutenant?" Whispers rippled across the hall. Mason's face went pale as he realized this wasn't just any recruit. Emily nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir." "No harm done?" The colonel studied her for a moment, then turned to Mason again. His tone hardened. "Private Mason, report to my office immediately. And pray I don't call General Anderson about this." The name hit Mason like a thunderclap. Anderson, the base's commanding general. Confused and terrified, he glanced back at the woman. Colonel Reeves looked around at the silent crowd. "For those unaware," he said sharply, "Lieutenant Emily Anderson is General Anderson's daughter. And if this is how we treat our fellow soldiers, we've forgotten what uniform we wear." His voice carried authority and disappointment in equal measure. Mason's legs nearly gave out. As the colonel left, Emily picked up the fallen cup and placed it on the table. Her movements were calm, graceful, untouched by the chaos she'd just endured. Every eye followed her as she walked out, her dignity shining brighter than any rank could ever display. Mason stood frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. He hadn't just insulted a fellow officer. He'd disrespected the general's daughter. And in that moment, he knew his can hour later, the tension across the base hadn't eased. Rumors spread like wildfire, soldiers whispering in corridors, exchanging shocked glances in the mess hall. Mason sat outside Colonel Reeves's office, his heart hammering against his chest. The same man who'd strutted around minutes ago now looked like a ghost. His uniform, once neatly pressed, was now wrinkled from nervous fidgeting. Every sound of footsteps made him flinch. Inside the office, Colonel Reeves stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the training grounds below. His face was unreadable, the kind of expression that made even the toughest soldiers tremble. When the door opened and Mason was ordered in, he stood stiffly, unable to meet the colonel's eyes. "Private Mason," Reeves said in a calm but cold tone. "I've heard some disappointing things about you. Care to explain?" Mason swallowed hard. "Sir, it was a mistake. I didn't know who she was." Reeves turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "You didn't need to know who she was. You just needed to know she was a soldier, your equal, your comrade." His words landed heavy. Mason's throat went dry. "Sir, I didn't mean to—" Reeves cut him off. "You didn't mean to show disrespect, or you didn't mean to get caught." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mason could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second stretching like an eternity. Finally, the colonel sighed, rubbing his temple. "Do you realize who you've embarrassed? Not just yourself, not just your unit, but this entire base." General Anderson personally trained his daughter to serve quietly, without privilege. And today, you turned her presence into a spectacle. Mason's face fell completely. "Sir, please, I'll apologize to her. Reeves raised a hand, stopping him. "You'll do more than apologize, Private. You'll learn what humility means." That afternoon, Mason was reassigned to cleanup duty, the lowest task on the base, scrubbing floors and washing trays while everyone else trained. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Some soldiers avoided looking at him, others whispered, but none dared mock him. Even those who'd laughed with him earlier now stayed silent. Respect wasn't a joke anymore. Arrear might already be over. Meanwhile, Emily continued her duties as if nothing had happened. She trained alongside others, calm and focused, earning quiet admiration from her peers. She never mentioned the incident, nor did she treat Mason with hostility when she saw him later that day. Instead, she gave him a small, almost forgiving nod, the kind that stung more than any punishment. Mason couldn't even bring himself to look her in the eyes. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the barracks, General Anderson himself arrived on base, his black SUV pulling up near the command center. The sight made every soldier tense. Even Colonel Reeves stood straighter when the general stepped out. A man in his late 50s, tall, broad, with a presence that filled the air like thunder before a storm. His eyes were sharp, but there was a controlled calm to him. He didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. When he entered Reeves's office, the colonel gave a crisp salute. "General," he began, "there was an incident earlier today. Your daughter handled it with professionalism, sir." The general nodded slowly, his expression neutral. "I've heard," he said, his tone quiet but heavy. "Private Mason?" Reeves nodded. "Discipline, sir. Reassigned temporarily." The general's gaze drifted toward the window. "Good. I don't want special treatment for Emily, but I do expect her to be treated like the soldier she is." Outside, Emily watched her father from a distance, her face calm but thoughtful. She had no desire for revenge or special privilege. She'd joined the military to serve, not to be seen as the general's daughter. But as she looked at Mason scrubbing the mess hall floor, she couldn't help but hope that maybe this humiliation would change him. Sometimes, lessons weren't learned through punishment, but through the reflection of one's own mistakes.